Crystal chandeliers cast geometric shadows across hand-painted silk wallpaper imported from Suzhou. The private dining room of the Aurelius Grand sits 40 floors above Manhattan, where the city becomes a constellation of amber lights below floor-to-ceiling windows. A table for 12 stretches beneath a ceiling fresco depicting the Silk Road. Merchants, camels, and caravanserais painted by an artist who charge more for this single commission than most people earn in a decade. The room smells of money. Not literally, of course, but that particular fragrance of polished mahogany, fresh orchids, and the subtle confidence that comes from knowing everything around you costs more than most people's yearly salaries. The wine glasses are Riedel, the plates are custom Bernadotte porcelain, and the napkins are Irish linen that feel like whispered promises against the skin. Elena Chen, 26, moves between shadows and light, with the practiced invisibility of someone who has learned to exist in margins. Her black server's uniform is pristine, pressed with military precision at 4 this morning before her shift at the bookstore. Her posture is perfect, shoulders back, chin level, spine straight, the posture of someone trained in formal presentation. But her eyes, dark and observant, sharp as obsidian, miss nothing. She adjusts a water glass by millimeters, aligning it with the knife's edge using a technique she learned from a hospitality manual written in 1927. A small gesture, the kind of precision that goes unnoticed by everyone, except those who understand that excellence lives in details. Her mother taught her that. Her mother, who once embroidered phoenix patterns on silk for tourists in Fuzhou, understood that beauty requires patience, and patience requires purpose. In her apron pocket, folded into a square no larger than a playing card, is a letter from Columbia University. Final notice. The words are seared into her memory. Due to non-payment of registration, fees, academic standing, suspended, reinstatement contingent upon. Her mother's medical bills have consumed everything, the savings, the scholarships, the future she'd been promised, the 23,000 fellowship that was supposed to fund her 4th year, the small inheritance from her father's life insurance, the money her sister sent from her teaching job in California, all of it gone, fed into the insatiable machine of American healthcare. 18 months ago, Elena was completing her doctoral dissertation on classical Chinese diplomatic language, specifically the evolution of tributary correspondence between the Ming court and the Joseon kingdom. She could read documents that hadn't been touched in 4 centuries. She could identify forgeries from the way scribes held their brushes. She understood the subtle hierarchies embedded in character choice, the political implications of specific honorifics, the 1,000-year evolution of imperial prose. Today, she fills water glasses. For people who will never know her name, the maitre d' Pierre approaches with the controlled urgency of someone managing a crisis. He's French-Canadian, meticulously groomed, and treats the waitstaff like chess pieces to be positioned for maximum effect. Elena has learned to read his moods by the tension in his shoulders. Pierre, low, tense. The Meridian Group. Tables confirmed for 8:30. Chen Weiming's people, the whole delegation. Elena's hands still for a fraction of a second. Chen Weiming. The name is a thunderclap in the silence of her mind. His face has been on the cover of Forbes Asia 3 times. His company, Meridian Holdings, controls shipping lanes across the Pacific, rare earth mines in 3 countries, and, according to whispered rumors in financial circles, the fates of small nations. He is the kind of man her father used to point out in newspapers, saying, "See how power works, Elena. It wears nice suits and speaks softly. Pierre Contide. I need you sharp. Tonight. No mistakes, no dropped plates, no wrong orders, no hovering. These people tip in amounts that could pay your rent for a year, and they notice everything." He doesn't wait for her response. To Pierre, she is a function, not a person, a mechanism for delivering exceptional service. She has learned not to mind, or rather, she has learned to hide that she minds, to fold that particular grievance into the small box where she keeps all the others. The dissertation advisor who stopped returning her emails, the classmates who forgot to invite her to their defenses, the life that slipped away while she was busy surviving. Elena moves to the window, pretending to adjust the drapes. Below, the city pulses with 10 million lives, each person certain of their own significance, their own trajectory through time. She thinks of her mother in the hospital bed in Queens, the monitors beeping their mechanical lullaby, the oxygen tube creating gentle fog on the inside of her nasal cannula. She thinks of the insurance forms multiplying like a virus, each denial spawning 3 appeals. Her phone buzzes, a text from her younger sister, MEI. "Mom's asking for you again. The doctors want to talk about next steps. Can you come tomorrow morning before your shift? Next steps. Such a gentle phrase for such devastating options. Hospice care. Experimental treatments insurance won't cover. Decisions that will haunt her for the rest of her life. Elena types a reply she doesn't send, then deletes it. What could she possibly say? That she's standing in a room where the centerpiece flowers, white roses and orchids arranged by a designer flown in from Tokyo, cost more than her monthly salary. That the people coming tonight could solve every problem in her life with what they spend on wine? She pockets the phone and returns to her preparations. The table must be perfect. The service must be invisible. And Elena Chen must pretend she is exactly what they will see. A waitress. Nothing more. Nothing less. But as she polishes the last fork to a mirror shine, she catches her own reflection in the blade. Fractured, distorted, barely recognizable. A scholar trapped in servant's clothing. A voice silenced by circumstance. A woman who can read the secret correspondence of emperors but cannot afford her mother's medicine. The elevator chimes in the distance. Footsteps in the corridor. They're arriving. The doors open, and power enters the room like a change in atmospheric pressure. You can feel it. A subtle shift in gravity, as though the very air has decided to pay attention. Chen Weiming, 58, leads the procession with the unhurried confidence of a man who has never had to rush for anything in his life. His suit is Brioni, charcoal gray, tailored to mathematical perfection. His watch, a Patek Philippe Nautilus in rose gold, costs more than a house in most American cities. But it's his presence that fills the space, the absolute certainty of a man who has never been. Told no and wouldn't accept it if he were. Behind him, a constellation of associates arranges itself by invisible hierarchy. Victor Huang, his chief legal counsel, moves with shark-like efficiency, his designer frames catching the chandelier light. His eyes scan the room with the assessment of someone cataloging potential threats and opportunities. Everything about him says, I bill at $1,500 an hour, and I'm worth every penny. Margaret Ashworth, an American investment banker from Goldman Sachs, enters next. Blonde, mid-40s, wearing a Chanel suit that costs more than Elena's annual salary. Her handshake has closed deals worth billions. Her smile is professionally warm, the kind that reveals nothing while suggesting everything. James Morrison follows, silver-haired, Texas-born, the CEO of Morrison Energy. His company is here to finalize what insiders are calling the deal of the decade, a $2 billion acquisition of mining rights that will reshape the global lithium market. His presence says old money, oil money, American money. He walks like he owns the building. In a different market, he might have. And then, slightly apart from the others, carrying himself with the coiled tension of a man perpetually calculating, Dr. Raymond D. Lee, 45, introduced as Meridian's Director of Antiquities and Cultural Acquisitions. His credentials, as listed in the briefing materials, are impressive. PhD from Beijing University, former consultant to the Palace Museum, author of 3 books on Qing Dynasty artifacts. His smile never quite reaches his eyes. There's something rehearsed about his expertise, something too smooth in his explanations. Elena stands near the wall, water pitcher in hand, as invisible as the silk wallpaper behind her. The guests settle into their seats with the casual territoriality of apex predators claiming their portion of the kill. Chen takes the head of the table. Morrison sits to his right. The placement speaks volumes about who is buying and who is selling. Chen Weiming, in Mandarin to Victor, 看看这个地方。美国人以为装饰肌肤中国画就能显得有文化，那浮山水画挂反了，他们都没注意到。Translation: Look at this place. Americans think hanging a few Chinese paintings makes them cultured. That landscape painting is hung upside down, and they haven't even noticed. Victor laughs, a genuine sound that he quickly suppresses. Margaret Ashworth smiles politely, clearly not understanding the joke. Elena continues pouring water, her expression unchanged, though something flickers behind her eyes. The painting is indeed upside down. She noticed it her first week. She's been waiting for someone else to catch it ever since. James Morrison. Mr. Chen, I have to say, this acquisition is going to reshape the energy sector. When your people first brought me the analysis, the lithium deposits, the processing facilities, the established supply chains, I knew we were looking at something special. When they told me about the historical documentation, the imperial land grants, he shakes his head in admiration. James Morrison, $2 billion is a lot of money, but for something this solid, it's the opportunity of a lifetime. Chen Weiming, smoothly in English. Please, James, tonight is about celebration. The contracts are ready, The documentation is complete. Dr. Lee has prepared everything with meticulous care. Let us enjoy the evening first. Business can wait for dessert. He gestures and Dr. Lee produces a leather portfolio, placing it at the center of the table with almost ceremonial reverence. The leather is hand-tooled, embossed with the Meridian Holdings logo. Inside, Elena catches a glimpse of documents, photographs, what appears to be aged parchment covered in classical Chinese characters. Dr. Raymond Lee. The imperial land grants Mr. Morrison, dating from the Xianfeng Emperor's reign, 1854. They establish Meridian's ancestral claim to the mining rights in western Sichuan, a claim that, under international law regarding indigenous and historical territorial rights, supersedes any modern governmental jurisdiction. It's quite extraordinary, really. Elena moves closer, refilling glasses one by one. The documents are beautiful. The calligraphy elegant, flowing with the authority of imperial command. The vermilion seals are vivid against aged yellow paper. The whole presentation speaks of antiquity, legitimacy, power. Morrison looks impressed, his Texas skepticism melting in the face of such apparent authenticity. Ashworth is already calculating commission percentages, her fingers twitching slightly as though reaching for a calculator. Victor Huang, in Mandarin to Chen, 这些老外太容易偏了，给他们看几张就职，他们就把钱包打开了。2年的准备，终于要收网了。Translation: These foreigners are so easy to fool. Show them some old papers and they open their wallets. 2 years of preparation, and we're finally reeling them in. Chen's lip curls slightly. Not quite a smile, but something close. Dr. Lee's eyes dart nervously between the principals, but he says nothing. His role is to perform expertise, not to participate in strategy. Elena is close now, close enough to see the documents clearly. Her scholarly training kicks in automatically, the way a musician's fingers find notes without conscious thought. She studies the brushwork, the thickness of strokes, the angle of the brush, the subtle variations that distinguish one calligrapher from another. She examines the paper, its texture, its color, the way it catches light. She notes the seal impressions, their depth, their color, their placement, and something cold begins to form in her stomach. A familiar sensation, the same feeling she got when she first identified a forgery in the Columbia archives. A Song Dynasty poem that turned out to be a 19th century reproduction, that creeping certainty that something is wrong, very, very wrong. Margaret Ashworth. $2 billion is substantial, Mr. Chen. My clients will want assurance that these documents have been properly authenticated. We can't base a transaction of this magnitude on antiquarian speculation. Dr. Raymond Ely. Of course, Ms. Ashworth, I understand completely. I personally supervise the authentication process. 3 independent experts, Beijing University's Department of Historical Archives, the Palace Museum's Conservation Division, and a private collector in Hong Kong with 40 years of experience, have all verified their authenticity. The documentation is airtight. He slides a folder across the table. Certificates with elaborate letterheads, official stamps, signatures from people with impressive titles. The bureaucracy of legitimacy presented with the confidence of absolute truth. Chen Waming notices Elena standing nearby, her pitcher now empty, but her retreat delayed by pretense of adjusting napkins. Chen Waming, in Mandarin, dismissive. 服务员给我们一些安静。你站在那里像根木头，听也听不懂。Translation: Waitress, give us some privacy. You're standing there like a piece of wood, not understanding anything. The table laughs. Even Margaret smiles politely at what she assumes is a harmless comment. Elena bows her head slightly and retreats to the wall, but her mind is racing now, parsing what she's seen, what she's heard. Something is very, very wrong, and it's not just the insult burning in her chest. The meal progresses through courses of increasing extravagance. Wagyu beef from Kobe, its marbling so perfect it looks like abstract art. White truffles from Alba, shaved tableside by a chef who traveled specifically for this occasion. Wine that costs $3,000 per bottle, a 1996 Screaming Eagle that Morrison ordered, with the casual confidence of someone who doesn't need to look at prices. The guests eat and drink and discuss the deal in terms that assume Elena is furniture. Supply chain integration, quarterly projections, the geopolitical implications of controlling 30% of the world's lithium supply. They speak as though the future is a commodity they can purchase, as though the world will bend to their spreadsheets. She moves between them, clearing plates, refilling glasses, her body performing its functions, while her mind works furiously. Each time she approaches the table, She allows herself another look at the documents. Small glances, stolen moments, the discipline of a scholar trained to extract meaning from fragments. The documents? She keeps returning to the documents. During her doctoral work, Elena spent 2 years studying imperial edicts from the Qing dynasty. She transcribed hundreds of them, working in climate-controlled archives where the air tasted of dust and preservation chemicals. She analyzed their linguistic patterns, their calligraphic styles, their bureaucratic formulas. She could date a Qing document within a decade, by the way. Its scribes formed their characters, the slight variations in brush technique that marked the reigns of different emperors, the subtle shifts in vocabulary that tracked political changes. And what she saw in that leather portfolio is making her hands tremble. When she reaches to clear Dr. Lee's salad plate, she allows herself a longer look at the documents spread before Morrison. Her trained eye catalogs details with the precision of a machine. The paper. It's aged correctly, yellowed with time, slightly brittle at the edges, the foxing pattern consistent with 170 years of existence. But the texture is wrong. Qing imperial documents used a specific type of mulberry bark paper, manufactured exclusively in Anhui province by artisans whose families had been making paper for emperors since the Ming dynasty. This paper's fiber pattern suggests modern production, the cross-hatched regularity of machine manufacturing, artificially aged with tea staining and heat treatment. She's seen this technique before in a forger's workshop she visited for her thesis research. The seals. Beautiful reproductions, she has to admit. The vermilion is chemically identical to traditional cinnabar paste. The impression depth is consistent with imperial seal protocols, but the imperial seal of the Xianfeng emperor contains a subtle error, a stroke in the fourth character, feng, that curves left instead of right. A mistake no genuine imperial seal would contain. The Xianfeng emperor's seal was carved by master craftsman Liu Zhengde in 1851, and Elena has personally examined 17 authentic impressions during her research. The stroke always curves right. And then, the calligraphy itself. Elena's heart rate increases as she studies the brushwork. The characters are elegant, certainly, the work of someone trained in classical forms. But they contain an anachronism that no genuine Qing document would include. The phrase Kuang Ye Xuan, Kuang Ye Quan, mining rights, appears 3 times in the main grant document. But this compound word didn't exist in the Qing dynasty. It was coined in 1912, during the Republic of China, when Western mining terminology was being translated into Chinese as part of the government's modernization efforts. The specific compound was invented by a translation committee in Nanjing, trying to adapt concepts from German mining law. In the Qing era, they would have written Kai Chai Zhi Chuan, Kai Chai Za Quan, the right to excavate. Different words, different era, an impossible anachronism. It's like finding email in a document supposedly written in 1854. The documents are forgeries, sophisticated, expensive, professionally crafted forgeries, but forgeries nonetheless. Elena steps back, her mind racing. $2 billion. That's what Morrison is about to pay for worthless paper, for phantom mining rights to deposits that may or may not exist, for a fraud so audacious it makes her dizzy. And Chen Weiming's people, they know. They've known all along. That's why they speak so freely in Mandarin. That's why they laugh about foolish foreigners. They think they're alone in their deception. They think the only Chinese speaker in the room is on their side. Chen Weiming, in Mandarin to Victor, 让雷蒙的再讲一遍那些学术废话。美国人喜欢专家的认可，多用几个复杂的词，他们就觉得自己很聪明。Translation: Have Raymond give them more of that academic nonsense. Americans love expert validation. Use a few complicated words and they think they're smart. Dr. Raymond Lai, switching to English to Morrison. As I was explaining, Mr. Morrison, the Xianfeng Emperor's land grants represent one of the last comprehensive territorial assertions where the Taiping Rebellion disrupted imperial administration. The documents utilize a form of administrative Chinese that was standardized during the Yongzheng reign, but retains certain archaic elements that authenticate there. Elena freezes. The Xianfeng Emperor, the dates, the Taiping Rebellion. She does the calculation instantly, the dates arranging themselves in her mind like pieces of a puzzle she didn't know she was solving. The documents claim to be from 1854. They claim to grant mining rights to territories in western Sichuan province. But by 1854, the Taiping Rebellion had already consumed the provinces mentioned in these land grants. The Taiping Heavenly Kingdom, That bizarre Christian-influenced revolutionary movement controlled most of southern China. The imperial government had lost functional control over those territories. They were battlefields, not administrative units. It would have been impossible for the Xianfeng emperor to issue land grants for territory he didn't hold. It would be like Abraham Lincoln issuing deeds for property in Confederate Georgia in 1863. Another impossibility. Another nail in the coffin of this elaborate lie. Victor Huang, in Mandarin laughing, 看那个服务员他在发呆，听不懂一个字，就相对照腔说话。这种人在中国只能扫地。Translation: Look at that waitress. She's spacing out, doesn't understand a word. It's like talking to a wall. People like her, in China, they'd only be good for sweeping floors. The table laughs. Chen, Victor. Even Dr. Li manages a nervous chuckle, though his eyes keep darting to the documents, then away. Elena keeps her face perfectly blank. 18 months of practice. 18 months of absorbing comments just like this one, swallowing responses that would cost her tips or her job. The customer who said she'd be prettier if she smiled. The executive who asked if she spoke English. The hedge fund manager who commented on her exotic features. But inside, something is shifting. The weight of everything she's lost, her education, her future, her mother's health, her dignity, presses against the walls of her restraint. Cracks are forming. Morrison is pulling out a pen, a Mont Blanc, its nib catching the candlelight. He's about to sign. $2 billion, a fraud that will reshape his company, destroy his shareholders' trust, and make Chen Weiming rich on lies. Elena looks at the pen, at the documents, at Morrison's trusting face and Chen's predatory smile. She thinks of her mother, of the hospital bills, of 18 months of silence and servitude and swallowed pride. And Elena Chen makes a decision. James Morrison, pen poised over signature line. $2 billion for the future of energy. Elena, in perfect Mandarin, her accent Beijing precise. 莫里森先生，请等一下。在您签字之前，我认为您应该知道这些文件是伪造的，每一份都是假的。Translation: Mr. Morrison, please wait. Before you sign, I believe you should know these documents are forgeries. Every single one of them. The room goes completely still. Chen Weiming's smile freezes on his face, muscles locked in an expression that no longer matches his eyes. Victor's jaw actually drops. A cliché made real. Dr. Li turns the color of old paper, the same yellow-white of the forged documents before him. Morrison looks up, confused, pen hovering over the signature line, like a bird uncertain whether to land. The silence stretches for 3 seconds. 4. An eternity measured in heartbeats. Chen Weiming, in Mandarin, recovering with forced calm. 这个服务员疯了，叫经理来，现在就叫。Translation: This waitress is insane. Call the manager, now. Elena, still in Mandarin, her voice steady as stone. 我建议您用英语讨论这件事，陈先生。考虑到您刚才说美国人容易被骗，还说我支配扫地，莫里森先生可能想知道您的其他评论。Translation: I suggest you discuss this in English, Mr. Chen. Given that you just said Americans are easy to fool, and that someone like me would only be good for sweeping floors, Mr. Morrison might want to know about your other comments. Morrison slowly lowers his pen. His face is shifting from confusion to concern. James Morrison. What exactly is going on here? Someone explain. Now? Elena steps forward, moving from the shadows into the chandelier light. Something changes in her bearing, a straightening, a settling, as though she's finally occupying her full height. This is not a waitress anymore. This is a scholar in her element, a warrior picking up familiar weapons. Elena, Mr. Morrison, I apologize for the interruption and for overstepping my position, but these imperial land grants you're about to pay $2 billion for are fraudulent. Sophisticated frauds, expensive frauds, but frauds nonetheless, every single one. Dr. Raymond Lee, standing abruptly, his chair scraping loudly. This is absurd. These documents have been authenticated by 3 independent institutions: Beijing University, the Palace Museum, a private collector with 4 decades of experience. This waitress is clearly confused or paid off. Or, Elena, calmly, let me show you. She moves to the table with a confidence that transforms her completely. The apron is still there, the uniform unchanged, but suddenly she looks like someone who belongs at this table more than anyone currently seated. Elena, Con TD. First, the paper. She gestures at the documents without touching them. Elena, Conti D, genuine Qing. Imperial documents used mulberry bark paper manufactured in Anhui province, specifically in the town of Jingxian by families who'd been making paper for the imperial court since the Ming dynasty. The fiber pattern is distinctive, parallel striations with occasional variations from hand pressing. This paper shows a cross-hatch pattern consistent with machine manufacturing, artificially aged with tea staining and heat treatment. I've seen this technique before. It's popular with high-end forgers in Taipei. She points to the imperial seal without touching it. Elena Conti D. Second, the imperial seal. The Xianfeng Emperor's personal seal contained 12 characters. The fourth character, Feng, should curve right on its final stroke, a distinctive feature of the seal carved by master craftsman Liu Zhengde in 1851. I've personally examined 17 authentic impressions of this seal during my doctoral research at Columbia. This curves left. It's a common error made by forgers who work from photographs rather than original impressions. Chen Weiming, voice dangerous. You're a waitress. You refill water glasses. You expect us to believe. Elena. I was a doctoral candidate at Columbia University. My dissertation focused on diplomatic language in Qing dynasty imperial edicts, specifically the evolution of tributary correspondence and territorial documentation. I've personally transcribed over 300 genuine imperial documents. I spent 2 summers in Beijing's first historical archives. I know what authentic looks like. This isn't it. Margaret Ashworth leans forward, her investment banker skepticism giving way to genuine interest. Morrison has set down his pen entirely. Elena Canty D. But here's the most damning evidence, the one that proves beyond any doubt that these documents are fraudulent. She leans over the table, pointing to a specific passage. Elena Conti D. These documents use the term Kuangye Chuan, Kuangye Quan, meaning mining rights. This compound word appears 3 times in the main grant document. But this phrase did not exist until 1912. It was created during the Republic of China by a translation committee in Nanjing, specifically to translate Western legal concepts related to mineral extraction. In 1854, when these grants were allegedly written, the phrase would have been Kai Kai Ji Quan, Kai Kai Zhu Quan, the right to excavate. Different words, different century. She turns to Dr. Li, who has gone very pale. Elena Conti, you're supposed to be Director of Antiquities, Dr. Li. You claim a PhD from Beijing University. Surely you know that linguistic anachronisms are the first thing experts check for when authenticating historical documents, unless, of course, you were counting on no one at this table reading classical Chinese. Dr. Raymond, voice cracking. The authentication certificates, Beijing University, the Palace Museum, they all confirmed. Elena, let me guess, the certificates came directly from Meridian Holdings, not from the institutions themselves. The experts' names are generic, probably real people who have no idea their credentials are being used. Mr. Morrison, have you personally contacted Beijing University or the Palace Museum to verify these authentications? Have you spoken to anyone whose name appears on these certificates? Morrison's face is turning red. He hasn't. Of course he hasn't. That's what he pays due diligence teams for. That's what he trusted Chen Weiming to handle. Elena, Tiantidi, and one final point. The point that makes all of this academic. She turns to face Chen Weiming directly. Her voice carries the weight of 18 months of invisibility, of insults absorbed, of dignity suppressed. But there's no trembling now, only certainty. Elena Conti. The documents claim to grant mining rights to territories in western Sichuan province during the Xianfeng Emperor's reign. But in 1854, those territories were under Taiping Heavenly Kingdom control. The Taiping Rebellion, surely you've heard of it, Dr. Li, had consumed most of southern China by that point. The imperial government had lost those provinces. The Xianfeng Emperor was fighting for survival. He couldn't grant rights to land he didn't hold. It would be like the Queen of England issuing property deeds for Boston in 1776. She pauses, letting this sink in. The room is absolutely silent. Elena Conti D. In Mandarin, her voice quiet but carrying. 陈先生，您说我站在这里想跟木头，但木头听得懂每一个字，木头什么都记得，木头也会说话。Translation: Mr. Chen, you said I was standing here like a piece of wood, but the wood understood every word. The wood remembers everything, and the wood can speak. The room has become a courtroom. The chandelier that earlier cast romantic shadows now feels like a spotlight. Morrison stands, his face a mask of controlled fury, the kind of rage that comes from realizing you've been played by people you trusted. Margaret Ashworth is already on her phone, speaking rapidly to what sounds like a legal team. Her voice is low but urgent. Yes, halt everything. I don't care what time it is. Wake them up. We have a situation. James Morrison, to Chen, his Texas accent thickening with anger. $2 billion. You were going to take $2 billion from me for forged documents. You sat at my table, drank my wine, shook my hand, and you were planning to rob me. Blind. Chen Weiming, attempting recovery. This is a misunderstanding, James. A terrible misunderstanding. The girl is confused. She's a waitress, for God's sake. She's probably seen too many movies. We should... James Morrison. She just demonstrated more expertise in 5 minutes than your director of antiquities has shown in 3 months of negotiations. She knew things about these documents that your so-called expert couldn't answer. She spotted anachronisms that your 3 authentication reports somehow missed. He turns to Dr. Lee, who was slumped in his chair like a marionette with cut strings. James Morrison, Con TD. Did you forge these yourself, Dr. Lee? Or did you have help? Who else is in on this? Dr. Raymond Lai, breaking, the words spilling out. I was just following orders. I didn't want to. Chen said the deal needed documentation. He said nobody would ever check, that Americans are too trusting. The mining rights don't actually exist. There are no lithium deposits. There's nothing there. It's worthless land. Victor Huang, urgent sharp. Raymond, shut up. Not another word. But it's too late. The confession hangs in the air like smoke. Margaret Ashworth has stopped her phone call, staring at Chen with the expression of someone watching a car crash in slow motion. Margaret Ashworth. My firm has been facilitating this deal for 6 months. We've put our reputation on the line. If what she's saying is true, if what he just confessed is true, we've been accessories to attempted fraud on an unprecedented scale. This is criminal. Chen Weiming, desperate, turning on Elena. Who paid you? Morrison's competitors? The Chinese government? How much did they offer? Everyone has a price. Name yours. Elena, ice cold. No one paid me anything, Mr. Chen. I've been paid $9.50 an hour to refill your water glass and absorb your insults. I did this because it was the right thing to do. Because I've spent my life studying the real history you tried to fake. Because some things matter more than money. Security arrives at the door, 4 men in dark suits, called by Pierre, who has been watching from the entrance in horrified fascination. The maitre d's face suggests he's already calculating how to spin this for the restaurant's reputation. James Morrison, to security, detain Mr. Chen, Mr. Huang, and Dr. Lee. No one leaves this floor until the FBI arrives, and someone get me a lawyer who isn't in their pocket. Chen's face contorts through several expressions: denial, rage, calculation, and something that might be grudging respect, before settling on something close to defeat. Victor Huang is already trying to make a call. Security takes his phone. Dr. Lee has collapsed back into his chair, head in his hands, muttering what might be prayers or apologies. As Chen is escorted toward the door, he passes Elena. He stops, and security pauses to allow this moment. The billionaire looks at the waitress as if seeing her for the first time, really seeing her. Chen Weiming, in Mandarin, quiet, almost wondering. 你会了我，一个服务员，2年的计划，21美元，都会了。Translation: You've destroyed me, a waitress. 2 years of planning, $2 billion, all destroyed. Elena, in Mandarin. 不，陈先生，您自己毁了自己。您用家里事来投真钱。您以为没人懂得真正的历史。我只是翻译，把真相翻译给那些应该听到的人。Translation: No, Mr. Chen. You destroyed yourself. You used fake history to steal real money. You assumed no one understood real history. I was just the translator, translating the truth for those who needed to hear it. Security escorts him out. The room seems larger suddenly, emptier, the chandelier light falling on vacant chairs where men who thought they owned the world sat just minutes ago. The room has emptied. Chen and his associates have been taken to a private holding area on the floor below, where they wait for federal investigators. Margaret Ashworth is in continuous conversation with lawyers, her own, Morrison's, and several others, whose specialties include international fraud prosecution. The table still holds the remains of their interrupted dinner, the wine glasses half full, the forged documents scattered like fallen leaves. Only Morrison remains, standing by the window, looking out at the city below, His reflection in the glass looks older than it did an hour ago, the face of a man reconsidering everything he thought he knew. Elena is quietly gathering the abandoned dishes. Her hands are steady, but her heart is still racing. What has she done? She's saved a stranger $2 billion. She's exposed an international fraud. She's probably destroyed her own career in hospitality. Pierre's face suggested as much. And in approximately 20 minutes, when the reality sets in, she will almost certainly be unemployed. No restaurant will hire the waitress who caused a scene at the biggest private dinner of the year, regardless of her reasons. James Morrison, without turning from the window. How much do you make here? At this restaurant? Elena, $9.50 an hour, plus tips. On a good night, maybe $300 total. This was going to be a good night before... She trails off. Before I ruined everything, hangs unspoken. James Morrison, turning to face her. Who are you? Really? And please don't tell me you're just a waitress who happens to read classical Chinese. I've built a $30 billion company. I know when I'm looking at something extraordinary. Elena sets down the plates she's holding. For a moment, she considers deflecting, keeping the mask in place. But she's tired of masks. 18 months of pretending to be less than she is. 18 months of being invisible. European history. Until he died of pancreatic cancer 3 years ago. She takes a breath. The words, once started, flow like water, finding its natural course. Elena, Con TD. I graduated summa cum laude from Princeton with a degree in East Asian Studies. I was valedictorian of my high school. I was accepted into Columbia's doctoral program with a full fellowship, the first in my family to pursue a graduate degree. My dissertation was on the evolution of diplomatic language in Imperial Chinese statecraft. I was 18 months from completion. James Morrison was... Elena. My mother was diagnosed with an aggressive form of breast cancer. Stage 4, metastatic. The treatments, the surgeries, the chemotherapy, the targeted therapies, the specialists, our insurance didn't cover most of it. The deductibles alone. I had to make a choice, my mother's life or my future. She doesn't elaborate, she doesn't need to. The choice is standing before him in a server's uniform, polishing someone else's silverware. Elena Cohen D. I've been working here for 18 months. 3 jobs, actually. This one, a bookstore in the mornings, data entry at night. The medical bills are $847,000 and counting. My mother is stable now, responding to treatment. But the debt is a life sentence. There's no self-pity in her voice, just facts. The arithmetic of survival. James Morrison, you just saved my company $2 billion. You exposed a fraud ring that's been operating internationally for at least 2 years. You did this while making $9.50 an hour and absorbing insults in a language they thought you couldn't understand. Elena, I did it because it was wrong. What they were doing was wrong. The documents they created, they weren't just lies. They were an insult to real history, to the scholars who've spent their lives studying the Qing dynasty, to the actual imperial scribes whose work they counterfeited. Morrison studies her for a long moment. Something shifts in his expression, the cold calculation of a businessman being replaced by something warmer. Respect, perhaps. Or recognition. James Morrison. Morrison. Energy operates in 14 countries. We deal with governments, corporations, regulatory bodies across 3 continents. Last year alone, we were presented with over 200 potential acquisitions, many involving historical claims, territorial rights, resource documentation from the 19th century or earlier. He walks toward her, stopping a few feet away. His presence is different now, less intimidating, more interested. James Morrison, KONTD. Tonight, I learned that my entire due diligence process is worthless. I almost handed over $2 billion for forged paper, because no one on my team, not my lawyers, not my analysts, not my consultants, could read classical Chinese. I trusted experts who were either incompetent or corrupt. He picks up the leather portfolio of forged documents, examines it, briefly, then sets it down with something like disgust. James Morrison, Contid. I need someone who can't be bought, someone who knows the difference between authentic and forged, someone who understands history well enough to spot lies dressed up as truth. James Morrison. I want to offer you a position, Director of Cultural Authentication and Historical Analysis for Morrison Energy. You would build a department from the ground up, hire your own team, set your own protocols. You would have final authority over any acquisition involving historical documentation, cultural claims, or territorial rights based on legacy agreements. Elena stares at him. The words aren't quite reaching her brain. They're bouncing off some protective barrier her mind has constructed against hope. James Morrison, Con TD. The base salary would be $400,000 annually, with performance bonuses tied to successful fraud prevention. Full benefits, health, dental, vision, the works. Stock options vesting over 4 years, and I would want you to finish your doctorate on company time, with company funding, Columbia or anywhere else you choose. Elena, barely audible. I can't, this isn't, words fail her. The distance between her reality and what he's describing is too vast to cross with language. James Morrison. Your mother's medical bills? What did you say? $847,000. He reaches into his jacket and produces a checkbook, old-fashioned, leather-bound, the kind of accessory that says some things are too important for digital transfers. He writes quickly, the pen scratching against paper with practiced efficiency. He tears off the check and sets it on the table before her. James Morrison, Sound TD. Consider that a signing bonus, $1 million. The debt is cleared as of tonight. Whatever's left over, put it toward your mother's ongoing care. Elena looks at the check. The number has too many zeros. Her vision blurs slightly. Tears, she realizes, that she can't quite control. Elena, you don't even know me. We've had one conversation. You can't. This isn't how the world works. James Morrison. I know that you watched a table full of powerful people dismiss you as furniture. I know that you absorbed their insults in a language they thought you couldn't understand. I know that you could have stayed silent, collected your tips, and walked away. You had no obligation to say anything. No one would have blamed you. He picks up the leather portfolio of forged documents. James Morrison, Con TD. But you didn't stay silent. You risked everything, your job, your anonymity, possibly your safety, to tell the truth. You stepped out of invisibility to protect a stranger from being robbed. That tells me everything I need to know about who you are. Elena, collecting herself, her scholar's mind reasserting itself. I have conditions. James Morrison, slight smile. I would expect nothing less. Elena, I want full autonomy in my department. No pressure to approve questionable deals. Because they're profitable. No executives leaning on me to overlook red flags. If I say documentation is fraudulent, the acquisition stops. Period. No exceptions, no appeals, no second opinions from consultants you trust more than me. James Morrison. Done. Elena and I want to establish a scholarship fund, the Chen Family Scholarship for first-generation Asian American students pursuing graduate degrees in the humanities, funded by Morrison Energy. Substantial funding, enough to cover tuition, living expenses, research costs, in perpetuity. Morrison extends his hand. It's the same hand that was about to sign away $2 billion to fraudsters. Now it's offering her a future. James Morrison. We'll announce it at the next board meeting, $5 million to start, with annual contributions thereafter. Name for your parents if you prefer. Welcome to Morrison Energy, Dr. Chen. Elena, shaking his hand. Not doctor, not yet. James Morrison. Soon enough, we'll make sure of it. Through the window, the city glitters 40 floors below. Millions of lights, millions of lives, each one carrying their own invisible burdens. Elena catches her reflection in the glass, no longer fractured, no longer distorted. For the first time in 18 months, she recognizes herself. The woman looking back at her is not a waitress, not a victim, not a martyr. She is a scholar, a truth teller, an equal, and her story is just beginning.